Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Professional People Podcast. Hard to believe I've been doing this for over a year now. 420 marks the 1 year anniversary of the podcast, so I thought it would be fitting to have two of my cannabis insurance brokerage friends, Lee and Erich, on the show to talk all things cannabis insurance and give us insights on the cannabis industry. Thank you guys so much for listening as always, and I hope you enjoy this episode. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Professional People Podcast. It is the week of 420, and I couldn't be more excited to get some insurance and cannabis specialists in to talk shop. I got Lee Woodruff and Erich Schutz, both with JenCap Holdings and doing cannabis insurance brokerage. Erich is in Massachusetts, and Lee is here in Michigan with me. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Whoever wants to start off and kind of give their background here and how they got into doing cannabis insurance, go ahead and take us on a ride here.
Yeah, I guess I'll start. So I'm Lee Woodruff. I'm a cannabis insurance specialist with JenCap, and I've been in the insurance industry my entire career. So dating back to 2008, I've been in the industry. Mostly in the surplus lines industry, which is kind of where all the fun happens, in my opinion. All the hairy accounts and the accounts that are a little bit scary tend to go over to the surplus lines industry. So, that's kind of what led me into the cannabis world is, these accounts are obviously a little hairy, a little scary, So I basically a couple of years ago just kind of identified it as an area that I wanted to learn more about, and then realized that there was definitely a need in our state for somebody that was really focused in the industry and kind of makes this their niche and can help agents and insureds, place coverage for their businesses that are growing rapidly and have all sorts of different exposures and risks associated with them. So yeah, that's kind of how I got started in it. It's been a couple of years. I've had some really good mentors. I've really relied on my network in the insurance industry to kind of guide me and kind of help me learn the ropes. And after a couple of years, I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of the industry, and that's kind of my background, I guess.
Awesome stuff. And Lee does a great job of helping me and has kind of become my mentor in the cannabis insurance space. And I know that Erich has been a big influence to helping you out and learning the coverage. Erich, can you kind of tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. Yeah. And I would start with saying it's all about paying it forward. And, I had to learn somewhere, and Lee did too. And, education and experience is, lacking in this industry, and it's not anyone's fault. It's new. So, we all have to kind of learn together and help each other out. And I really too believe in paying it forward and, kind of making it a little easier for the people that come after us, because it's a grind, and there's a lot of room for error. And that's why it takes a specialist to kind of dig in and read. But, my story starts very similar to Lee's. Been in business since, right out of college, back in like 2008, was lucky to fall into a carrier job when the market was really tough and there weren't a lot of opportunities for people coming out of school. So I, kind of started at the bottom, an underwriting assistant's role at national carrier, Lloyd's carrier. So I got some good experience in the surplus industry, underwriting, a couple different fields for about 6 years, and saw the brokerage sales side of the business, saw the opportunity, the potential to not be chained to your desk and kind of choose your own destiny, so to speak. And, I just really wanted to do something different and not see commercial property all day, architects and engineers all day. Saw an opportunity at a company that was actually one of my clients, small regional E&S wholesaler, and, jump ship, and we really never look back. So after working there for a few years as a generalist in a lot of different, areas, as Lee said, just the scary, freaky, and weird, or it's just a really nice risk that's brand new but on the water. So got to cut my teeth at a shop that did really good by me and learned a lot of different things. An opportunity to kind of get over to the big leagues and join NIF and JenCap, and got a tap on the shoulder and an offer I couldn't refuse. And, really that was my opportunity to go much more all in the cannabis space, having, bigger national presence and a lot of markets. So, it was about 3 years ago, we went all in on cannabis myself and brought JenCap with me, NIF, and now Lee too after that. So that's where I came from and how I got to where I am today.
Yeah, that's awesome background for you guys. And just to tell the listeners who might not be as insurance versed as we are, these guys, when they're talking about surplus and brokerage, when I can't find a standard carrier as me as an agent to place a risk, I go to guys like Lee and Erich to go try to find a carrier who will, and they assist me throughout that process and give me a lot of the technical side of things and aware me of the exposures that these hairier risks, as Lee will say, might have. So just to clear the air on that and lead us into cannabis, what do you guys see why that the insurance companies kind of are having a hard time accepting cannabis into the standard market, and kind of these cannabis businesses are having a hard time finding companies that will insure? Can you guys kind of talk about how the landscape started from the insurance perspective and things when cannabis was legalized in states like Colorado and Washington, and then just briefly lead us up to kind of where we're at today?
Sure. When cannabis insurance started, back, West Coast, everything was medical, which to some degree almost made it a little bit easier for carriers to jump in, because they're looking at it from the standpoint of this is medicine. There's a need. Let's underwrite to that. Let's think of coverage as such. And, there weren't many carriers, but there were some of your kind of, Main Street, normal, everyday surplus lines carriers, so still on the hairier side of things, that were writing it. A lot of them got burnt bad just because they didn't necessarily understand the coverages, the product and such. But they were able to lean in and like I said, a lot of them got burnt. So there weren't many players out there. Coverage was really restrictive. And then what happened was as they started to, learn through losses, as some of the states started to go recreational, it actually almost restricted things more in the really early days, because now we have something that's not just a medicine, but it's, it's like alcohol. It's a recreational product that people are using to get banged up, however you want to describe it. That has a whole different implication in coverage and usage and the reasoning why you're using it, where you're using it. And that frankly just scared the heck out of underwriters and carriers and kind of made them restrict a little bit. And that's when there was a real gap. And then some programs came out. Folks pretty much realized that this product isn't going anywhere. The marketplace for cannabis is not robust. And, some people just said, what, if the regular markets and the surplus lines arena that we have now aren't going to do it, then we need to find somebody who will and create our own programs. And that's what a few folks did, and really kind of pioneered the coverage and the comfortableness that carriers now have. Started with a few players just leaning in and pretty much just bootstrapping a program and finding different carriers that would write it. And they'd get one carrier that do the property portion, another carrier that do general liability, and came together to something that is the groundwork of what we have today.
That's awesome. And I think you did a really good job of explaining why, from the insurance company's perspective, why it's such a tricky situation and risky, because there's so much unknown, right? Or there was, especially in the beginning. You guys have talked a lot about restrictive coverage. Lee, can you kind of talk about some of the things that played out in the early losses in the industry and why coverage is restricted in certain places, and kind of highlight those areas?
Yeah. The main, it's still probably the highest frequency of losses for these cannabis companies is coming, from theft losses. So the early days were no different. I think the restrictions that are put in place by the carriers today, in regard to theft, they're really not, I wouldn't even look at them really as restrictions. It's more just using sound risk management, techniques to, keep your business safe. So, there are restrictions as far as, where does the product, for a dispensary, where does the product have to be stored? how much product can be out available to the customer at any given time, the vault definitions, the safe definitions, and what each carrier deems an approved safer vault. But really, I don't believe that I'd consider it more, a restriction. It's more just a forced risk management technique, or, that's kind of how I look at it, for the insured.
And that's almost to the insured's benefit. It is to the insured's benefit to prevent losses, and that's why they are making all of this required.
Absolutely. And I mean, if all the losses are coming from that particular, a lot of the losses were coming from theft, let's, figure this out, because if all the losses are going to continue in that fashion, the price to obtain theft coverage is just going to be astronomical. So it's benefiting the industry as a whole, not just necessarily, that particular insured, keeping the coverage affordable.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of affordable, Erich, how has the pricing kind of changed from the early days when there was only the few players in the market to now there's a little bit more competitiveness? What kind of pricing are you seeing, a hard or soft market kind of going on right now?
It's actually a great question and very interesting, because I think if you ask different brokers around the country in different places, they have different opinions. And I think that, a lot of them would say that prices are going up. And while I agree that that's the trend, I'm still seeing lower rates coming out on renewal on some deals of property and liability. And it's, in my opinion, 100% a function of competition. There was definitely a little bit of a take it or leave it attitude by some markets previously. Some of it was justified, some of it was an attitude. Now we have people getting 3 or 4 different quotes on a risk. If you've got a good broker, or you're an agent who's got a direct relationship with the program, and then you've got a good broker that can access other cannabis markets, you should be presenting 2 options at least to a client to at least show that what they had last year is still the best in the business. But we're seeing is a lot of times when there's another market involved or another broker, all of a sudden the carrier's slashing pricing by 15-20% on renewal to retain the account. So I mean, it tells you either that they were charging far too much, or that competition is showing them that if they want to retain the business, they need to change their pricing model. So, seeing accounts that even though it's an extra year of coverage, so technically if all else equal, if you have a year over year, there should be an increase because we're giving what's called prior acts coverage for something you did in the past. Now, generally you get an extra 5% bump every year for that. Again, we're seeing companies coming out with rates that are either flat or going in the opposite direction. Property is the same too. If you're not cobbled by TIV limits, and you have more than 1 or 2 markets that's going to be able to quote that particular cannabis risk for you, whether it's a grower, processor, retail shop, or all the above, now you have some pricing leverage. And some of the carriers are either know that, so they're sharpening them up off the bat, or they're finding out if there's pressure and then changing. Our stance is you should always assume that there's pressure and you should be giving the best product. And it's definitely a frustration when we see some of the competing terms come in and all of a sudden they slash we're $100,000 deal and they're all of a sudden slashing $30,000 off it. That tells me something is way off and is a concern, and something that we think competition will fix, to be honest.
And do you guys think, either one of you could take this question, do you guys think that competition trend will continue to be more and more players entering the market as we see more loss history on these kind of businesses, and cannabis around the national and by state level becomes more of a regular thing?
Yeah, I definitely would say, there's going to be more carriers entering the industry. There's a bipartisan bill right now, the Claim Act, which basically would allow cannabis companies, the insured and the carriers, it would basically provide some protection and availability of insurance products without the scrutiny of, the federal government coming in and, basically it's still federally illegal, but it's going to protect them and protect the insurance companies. So we think that will eventually lead to more carriers getting into the space. It's probably going to take a year or 2 for, carriers to kind of get up and running. And then at the same time, they're still going to have to, have file their forms. A lot of the admitted companies look to file their forms. So it's going to definitely take some ramp up period, but yeah, we're going to see more carriers getting involved. Whether the products are adequate in providing, competitive premiums and, good coverage, that, will be something we'll have to look at, but we're definitely going to see more competition entering the space.
Add to that real quick, with some of the bills that are in legislation, safe banking and the Claims Act that Lee mentioned, we're going to see a big surge in capital on both sides of the fence. The insurance operators, carrier side, and also the actual cannabis operators. It's going to change the landscape, and really, where we're going is this will be a product that's not in the scary, hairy world that Lee and I live in. It's, it will be a surplus lines play for the most part for a very long time, and a lot of it will be, but there's going to be retail shops, and they're already, getting there, where there are programs where they're carving out a little bit of area where you can have that nice Main Street admitted coverage that your basic mercantile risk has now, and really they should. So there's no reason why we can't get there. I think we need to just clear up some of the legislative and legal hurdles that are just making people fearful. And if you're a big national insurance carrier, are you going to risk it all for jumping into a small cannabis book? Probably not. But once we remove some of those legal restrictions and hurdles that some are perceived, some are real, the fear of the unknown is too great for too many investors, so they won't want to stay away. But it's becoming so normalized on the regulatory side and on the Main Street side and individual operators. It's coming very soon, and it's going to make life better for all of us, because the coverage needs to be better and the pricing should be more affordable.
Yeah, that does a really good job of explaining how that impacts the insureds. Can we kind of talk a little bit more about how the legal hurdles and legislation is impacting the insureds in the cannabis market? Me and Lee were working on this week, and there's just so many hoops they got to jump through just to get a license, get their insurance taken care of. What do you guys see that are kind of the biggest hurdles that insureds in the cannabis industry have to jump through? And do you see those lightening up at all?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would start by saying, the insured just being aware of, that insurance is available. That's a big hurdle. Like a lot of these companies, they may work with an agency that is not focused in cannabis. They may not really understand what's actually available to them out there. So a lot of the hurdles are more just like, you understand that there's coverage available out there, and we need to get the information so that we can properly underwrite it. So, just being able to tell this, the insured just being able to tell their story, show photos, kind of tell us what their outlook is for their company and where they're going and where they're at currently. The more information that they can provide to their insurance agent, the better opportunity they're going to have to, really find competitive terms and competitive pricing by telling the story to the carrier and getting the carrier to be very comfortable with the risk. So a lot of these things that we think are maybe hurdles, it's more just they're not used to having to provide that much information and really think ahead to, here's where I am today, here's where I want to be in 5 years as a business owner. Because a lot of that does play into which markets Erich and I would approach. If you had an account that was planning to, they're all growing rapidly, but in this particular case, if you had an account where they're planning to, construct a new cultivation facility, that's something that we would want to know ahead of time, because there's carriers that we would want to place the coverage with that have the capacity to add that type of building to their policy. So really just kind of getting the information. It seems like a hurdle at first, because it is a lot. The applications are pretty daunting and long. But it's definitely information that is useful and can benefit them.
Yeah, and I would add, the regulatory environment is difficult. Every state is nuanced, and having a good lawyer, consultant, accountant, costs a lot of money, and that's one of the largest hurdles, is to do it right. In most of the states, it takes a lot of capital, and that's one of the issues, and that comes back to social equity and some other topics around that. But it's tough if you don't have the right team, and the right team costs money. And then once you're there, you have these different forms, special licenses, special insurance for particular licenses. And I don't see that right now getting any easier. States are doing a better job articulating what an operator needs. So you're not spending quite as much on that consultant and lawyer, because they're putting FAQs up on the website and such. But it's still really the Wild West, and fraught with pitfalls. And I think some of the regulations were done with the best intentions. Michigan's a great example, trying to make sure that there was some product liability coverage, which is great, but then how they implemented the type of product liability and the formation of it was not so great. And like to see something like that improve. But we're seeing states require insurance, especially states that came on later, like Massachusetts and Michigan, versus the early adopters on the West Coast don't have the same requirements. So I if anything, seeing the regulations and hurdles growing. Maine's a state that's near and dear to me, and because they've gone recreational lately, that has greatly changed the caregiver and medical landscape. And the regulations for those folks who have been operating pretty unfettered for years now have to jump through a lot more hoops, do more paperwork. Some of it is absolutely justified in paperwork that they were doing already or should have been doing already. And some of it is a little over the top. So I think it's getting more difficult and a little more expensive to operate. But we passed safe banking. We allow cannabis operators to have access to traditional funding, mortgages, loans, like every other business. That'll counter that, and that will give them more of the resources they need to combat some of the regulations and things that are there for better or worse.
That's great insight, especially for startup cannabis people, or people who might be thinking about getting into it. What about one question I had of where do you see potential for growth within the cannabis industry? Are you guys seeing, obviously all across the board, a ton of growth potential, but is there any certain kind of class of cannabis business that you guys are seeing really take off right now, whether it be cultivators or transportation businesses or dispensaries themselves?
I guess I'd say, across the board, I don't think it really is specific to a single operation. Across the board, we're seeing, cultivators, processors, retail dispensaries, or provisioning centers here in Michigan. The dispensaries, one area within kind of what we're talking about is, the delivery service for these dispensaries. That's an area that, COVID has really had an impact on the delivery of cannabis products to consumers. So that's an area where coverage, a lot of these businesses weren't planning to deliver until COVID came along. And that's an area that we've seen more inquiries and requests for coverage. With that being said, it's definitely a tough coverage to place. So, we can't always help, because it's a pretty expensive coverage, but that's kind of an area within the industry that's really taken off.
Yeah, that's a good point to make. And those transportation risks outside of cannabis themselves are very costly on the insurance end of things. So I'm sure you guys are seeing a lot of the same thing when it comes to rates for transportation of cannabis.
Yeah, for sure. And the transportation side of cannabis is newer. A lot of states didn't legislate delivery early on. Some states allowed it because of COVID. So that's an area where the coverage is not quite as robust as a regular retail operation with no delivery. So not going back a few years, it's like before. Not as many carriers, not as good a coverage. But back to your question about potential growth opportunities, I'm always going to answer from a Main Street investor side. And I'd say it's the ancillary businesses. I love a good non-leaf touching business that makes the containers for extracts or the child-proof containers that are compostable, things like that. That's where I see a lot of growth and opportunity, because the regulatory environment can greatly change most of my insured's lives. If the Fed legalizes cannabis, makes it a Schedule II controlled substance, that will change things greatly. So I see the ancillary businesses are ones that really have the stay power, because they're always going to need the containers. They're always going to need the security services. They're always going to need the heat sensors, the cameras, the lights. So that's where I see a lot of growth. And I think it's also kind of an untapped area where folks are always swinging for the fences, whether it's from an insurance standpoint, trying to land an account as an agent or an investor. They want the big grows, they want the extractors, but there's a lot of good opportunity in those companies and a lot of good intellect. So I would definitely keep an eye on those. And we're seeing, like I said, growth on, the insurance side too. Also extraction. That's where the big money is, in my opinion, in the cannabis industry. There are plenty of people that can grow it. There's plenty of people that can sell it. There's not as many that can process it and turn it into another product that's useful. And I find that the shops that are going fastest and doing the biggest things are the ones that had the biggest foothold and control in extraction, whether they had other, they're vertically integrated, meaning they had the grow, the extraction, and the retail, or they just said, you know what, we're going to buy wholesale cannabis from a grower. We're going to process it for them, extract it, sell it back to them, or sell it to a retailer. Those are the guys that are printing money faster than anyone else in the business, in my opinion. So that's where I see a lot of growth from an insurance standpoint and from an investment standpoint.
That is unreal insight. Thank you so much for sharing, Eric. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing, Lee, too. I could sit here and talk to you guys about cannabis insurance for hours on end. But I did want to wrap up with just one tip from each of you that you have. It could be for professional people, but I think for this podcast, we might need one tip for professional cannabis people out there. What do you guys got? Lee, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I would say one tip, and it's a tip that I kind of took to heart because I received the same tip. Dive in. I don't think that you can really understand this industry without jumping in with both feet. Read articles, talk to people, go visit dispensaries, and use your network, to learn. Just be a very curious person. I think if you kind of make it, if it's your passion and you kind of treat it like that, you're gonna, talk to people, learn, and just really make it your niche. So my advice would be to dive in.
Great advice, Eric. What do you have to end it up here?
Well, that's the advice I gave Lee, so it's kind of unfair. But no, I will build on that, because it's spot on. You bury yourself in the forms. If you're on the insurance side of it, you need to read the coverage. You got to nerd out on the policy and just get into it. I think it's very important. Wherever you are in the business on the professional side, you need to go walk some facilities. You need to see the places. If you're on the insurance side, go get into a couple places. Call Lee. He'll take you on a walk around. Being in the back of the house in one of those facilities is invaluable. And everybody has a perception of what an operation is like, how, the smell, the feel, the look, and it's undescribable. You just need to go there. And as I said, echoing what Lee just said, you dig in, go all in, build the network. What is great about cannabis is such a place where people are so willing to share, learn, mentor. So take advantage of that, especially when the early goings, while people are still so willing to be forward with info, network with folks, join a local trade group. There's a couple good associations out there that are really doing great things. Partner with one of them and find a mentor and a friend.
Great advice, guys. And thanks again for coming on. And thank you, Lee and Eric, for kind of mentoring me through this stuff as we keep going. And I hope to keep growing with you guys. And I hope you guys keep doing big things and protecting all of those cannabis business owners out there. Guys, have a good one. Thanks for coming on.
Likewise. Thanks so much, Dan. Keep paying it forward.
Thanks for listening. And remember, keep it professional, people.